Is Tom Lonsdale. He is currently the chair of the Marsden Community Trust, which was set up to take an asset transfer of a former mechanics hall. And so he will be presenting our next paper.
The story of Marsden Mechanics reminds us about the essential bond between places, people and buildings. In this instance, the place is the wonderful village of Marsden, high in the Pennine Hills east of Manchester. This distinctive landscape is now greener than it was, but still displays the bones of the Industrial Revolution, with classic examples of mills, terraced housing, reservoirs, canal and railway. Our magnificent Mechanics Hall nestles right in the heart of the village centre, and that intimate relationship tells an important story about the lives of the people who made the village what it is today. Those people are the real subject of this presentation. They make up a vibrant community of headstrong people whose determination gives this place its character, built the mechanics in the first place, and has kept on renewing its capacity for life and meaning for over 160 years. That same headstrong tendency was very much in evidence at the beginning of the 19th century, when Marsden was the epicentre of the Luddite rebellion, before the Mechanics Institution was a glint in the eye. It was a Marsden mill owner, William Horsfall, whose murder led to the authorities deciding enough was enough, and the uprising being crushed in 1813 as a result. The cropping frames that sparked the uprising were manufactured by Enoch Taylor, who is buried here in Marsden. It's also said that he forged the sledgehammers used by the Luddites. According to legend, Enoch makes them and Enoch breaks them. His son, James Taylor, later became the first president of Marsden Mechanics Institution when it was formed in 1841. In its early years, the institution had to meet in hired premises, such as this cottage, but it soon began to outgrow such places. Several hundred people regularly turned up at their glamorous soirees. These attracted star performers of the day, like Mrs. Sunderland, Yorkshire Queen of Song. To accommodate these large gatherings and the institution's library of 3,000 books, local fundraising for a new hall began in 1857 and raised £1,500 within 2 years. Construction had a faltering start, with initial work being condemned and a new builder engaged, but the new building finally opened in 1861 at a cost of £2,500 and with a lingering debt of £200 still due. The village centre site backed onto the original Shakespeare Inn. Consequently, little architectural attention was paid to the south elevation, which became clear to see when the Shakespeare was knocked down and rebuilt elsewhere. Compare the lavish treatment of the two more prominent north and east elevations, with William Shakespeare gazing down to encourage the working people to come and study there. The building's initial glory sadly did not last, and decline began to set in by the turn of the 20th century. Propped up by the council for the next 50 years, it remained popular as a leisure venue for dances and parties, etc. But the fabric was never properly maintained, and it was closed in 1968 by Kirklees Council, who saw no future for it. For some residents, its sooty exterior at the time seemed like a reminder of the dirt and rigour of factory life they were keen to forget. The library shelves had also been stripped of their famed stock of books, and the main hall would hardly be good enough for a barn dance. On the other hand, a significant sector of the community saw things differently and were not prepared to accept the loss of this irreplaceable facility that symbolises the place. They managed to get it listed, then organised themselves into a new community association and took occupation in the form of a squat to demonstrate to the public authorities that it was still in demand. After 12 years of pressure, Kirklees were eventually persuaded to obtain grants and carry out a £900,000 refurbishment, which turned the south elevation into the new accessible entrance. Stone cleaning removed the soot of the industrial era, and the iconic clock tower was treated to a colourful new suit of clothes. A new buzz of life quickly developed and prevailed for the next 25 years under a local management committee. For instance, Sure Start Creche for toddlers. Music for all ages and tastes. A wide range of parties and celebrations. Weddings and receptions. And famous names at the annual jazz festival, drawing audiences from far and wide. Once again, though, the good times didn't last. The council still owned the building fabric and unfortunately let their grip on upkeep fail again. Extensive rot set in, especially in the windows, and the community were powerless to intervene. In 2015, the whole village was leafleted to test the idea of taking full ownership in order to avert this demise. Various unorthodox techniques and odd characters were deployed in pursuit of community awareness and support. At the end of the campaign, a public meeting voted unanimously for creation of Marsden Community Trust and asset transfer of the building, which was completed in 2017. The new trust devised a 3-stage action plan geared to a more efficient management in the short term, eliminate the maintenance backlog, and with the potential to extend the building and make it more profitable in the long term. The new owners immediately secured a European Leader grant to refresh and adapt the library space so that it could also accommodate diverse events. Some inefficient space was taken from the library to create 2 new offices for the non-profit tenants, Micron Theatre Company and Marsden Jazz Festival. Rebranding the exterior livened up the uninteresting south elevation and announced the community ownership, whilst new lighting also gave the building some sparkle in the long Pennine winter evenings. Just as things were looking up, COVID arrived. The building had to close its doors, as did the National Lottery, who were seen as the last hope for funding the repair work needed. Then, just as we were coming out of lockdown, in August of this year, the lottery came up trumps. The work can now go ahead, and a new community and business development worker will be appointed to cement the building even more securely into place as the hub of the village for the foreseeable future. I don't know what I did in a former life to deserve the 40 years of hard slog this campaign has cost me, but there is evidence to suggest that I had no choice once I was born with the name Lonsdale. In 2004, I attended the first World Conference in Melbourne, Australia, and Jim Loudon took me to see this commemorative tablet in the Athenaeum. Apparently, my namesake, Captain Lonsdale, was their first president. I leave you now with a brief glimpse of some moments that have made the effort worthwhile and can now continue far into the future. Thank you.
Tom, thank you so much. That's an incredible story. There's a theme, I think, emerging out of some of the papers that we've heard in this session of just the power of human resilience and the value of never giving up. So congratulations to you and to the community for having been able to maintain this resource. A question I have for you is that if you look out 50 years and if things go as well as possible, what kind of role will this organization play in the Marsden community?
Well, that's a welcome question, because we do have ambitions that extend beyond the building itself. The building in the short term needed rescuing, but it's such an important link between the early history of the village and its potential future that we wrote the constitution of the trust deliberately to be much further reaching in terms of the regeneration of the village. So the plan is to use the headquarters to use the building as a headquarters, both to function as a hub for the village, but also as a platform from which to drive forward the regeneration. And that's very timely, I think, with things like very recently there's been a new park designated called South Pennines Park. It's an area of upland landscape that Marsden sits at the gateway of, and so we see Marsden as potentially benefiting and contributing to the future of that new park.
Wonderful. We had another question come in the Q&A, and then Sue Rowe made a comment that I think go together nicely. The question that came into the Q&A is, it says there are many small mill villages in the Pennines. Why does Marsden Institute stand out among them as being so ambitious? And then in Sue's comment, she suggests that part of it is community. And so I'll add to that question by asking if you think other councils might sell or donate to community groups, and does this need the magic ingredient of a few good people?
Wow, there's about 10 questions in there.
Yes.
Right, other councils initiating community takeover, I think would not work. The initiative lead must come from within the community. And one of the reasons Marsden does stand out, I think, is that its position as a frontier village has given its populace a really stubborn streak that has taken us through all sorts of developments and setbacks. So I think that's the reason the community stands out in Marsden, but also the building itself has been the trigger. The fact that its position is so central to the village, its iconic role, it is a real stimulus that's galvanized the community ever since the council tried to close it. I mean, the irony is that the council tried to close it once and eventually were forced into asset transfer by the council's own financial difficulties. Don't know whether that begins to answer all those questions.
That's a wonderful start. Thank you so much for your paper and for your work and for representing your community.